The jungle breathed around her, a symphony of unseen creatures whispering through the dense foliage. Ambassador Lynara moved cautiously, her feline-like tail twitching with apprehension. Her people, the Zevani, were known for their grace, their intelligence less so for their survival skills in the harsher corners of the adult galaxy. That was why she wasn't alone. Behind her, moving with a confidence born from battles waged in distant wars, was the human, Lieutenant Jake Carter. He wasn't just her bodyguard, he was her anchor to the chaotic and unpredictable reality of deep space diplomacy. His boots crunched against the damp ground, but his breathing remained measured, his senses ever watchful. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered, her voice just above a whisper. Jake didn't slow. "That's because it's meant to." Lynara stole a glance at him, noting the ever-present readiness in his posture. He had that look again, like a predator anticipating an ambush. She wished she shared even half his instincts. The Zevani were scholars, negotiators. They had been thrust into the greater galactic stage unprepared for the brutal truths of survival beyond their domed cities. But today, none of that mattered. Today, they were walking into a ruin older than most civilizations in the known galaxy, hoping to retrieve what might be the last remaining key to peace between warring factions. The temple loomed ahead, its ancient stone walls swallowed by vines and decay. Their informant had been clear: inside was a relic, a device buried by time and war, something powerful enough to bring balance. Or ruin. It all depended on whose hands it fell into first. Lynara reached the entrance and hesitated. "Something's wrong." Jake exhaled sharply. "Yeah. Because this is too easy." They had fought their way through mercenaries, eluded the automated sentries left behind by whatever civilization had built this place, and yet now nothing. Just silence. A stillness that made the air thick with anticipation. Lynara's sharp eyes caught the faintest glint in the doorway. She swallowed. A trap. Jake's gaze flicked over the entryway. He didn't even hesitate. "Get back." Before she could stop him, he moved. His body became a blur, a force of sheer momentum as he shoved her aside just as the floor beneath him gave way. A sharp, metallic snap echoed through the jungle. A spike trap, ancient but still deadly, sprung from the hidden depths below. Lynara's heart slammed against her ribs as she saw the gleam of blades driving upward. Jake took the hit. Steel pierced his side, a jagged spike erupting through his armor, splitting through muscle and flesh. His teeth clenched, but the only sound he made was a choked breath. Lynara's scream was lost in the rush of adrenaline as she scrambled toward him, her fingers shaking as she grabbed his arm. Jake, no." Blood dripped onto the ground, soaking into the moss-covered stone. He gave her a tight-lipped smile, the ghost of amusement flickering in his eyes. "Well, I'd say that was worth it." "Worth it?" she hissed, panic making her voice sharp. "You're bleeding out." He grunted, shifting his weight against the spike. "Better me than you." Lynara's mind raced. Her people weren't warriors, but they weren't useless either. She yanked her satchel open, digging through supplies. "Hold still." "Not going anywhere," Jake muttered. His humor in the face of pain both infuriated and terrified her. She worked quickly, her hand steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. The spike was embedded deep, too deep for her to pull out without making things worse. She pressed a coagulant patch against the wound, her tail lashing in agitation. "I need to deactivate the mechanism," she whispered. "You can't move yet." Jake gave a slow nod, his jaw tight. Lynara turned her attention to the trigger mechanism, scanning the ancient grooves and pressure plates. The Zevani weren't warriors, but they were puzzle solvers. And right now, her skills were the only thing keeping Jake from bleeding out entirely. The seconds dragged. Her breathing slowed as she focused, her fingers moving with precision. One wrong move and the entire trap might reset, or worse. Her ears twitched as she felt the final lock click into place. With a soft hiss, the spike mechanism disengaged. Jake slumped forward, groaning. Lynara caught him, her smaller frame barely managing to keep him from collapsing outright. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. She pressed her forehead against his for just a moment, Zevani tradition for comfort. You reckless, stubborn human. Jake chuckled weakly. You're welcome. Lynara swallowed hard, her grip tightening. The temple had already drawn first blood. And something told her this was only the beginning. The temple interior was worse than Lynara expected. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of some long-forgotten alien energy running through the cracked stone. Symbols older than any known civilization lined the corridors, their meaning lost to time. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something ancient, watching. Jake gritted his teeth as he leaned against the cold stone. He wasn't dying. Not yet. But Lynara could hear the ragged edge in his breathing. The wound wasn't just deep, it had poisoned him with something. His skin had taken on a sickly pallor, veins darkening beneath the surface. She worked quickly, securing his side with an advanced sealant patch, her fingers pressing firm against his fevered skin. You are the most reckless being I have ever met, she murmured, her voice tight. Jake huffed a laugh. Not reckless. Just lucky. That's debatable. She scanned his wound. The bleeding had stopped, but the infection was spreading. They didn't have time. We have to move. Jake pushed himself up, and for a moment, she thought he would collapse. But the stubborn human grit his teeth and forced himself to stand. His resilience both amazed and frustrated her. Lynara's ears twitched at a distant hum, an energy shift that made her fur prickle. They weren't alone. Something stirred deeper inside the temple, awakened by their presence. She felt it, an awareness, unseen yet tangible. We need to find the artifact and get out before whatever that is finds us, she said, scanning the ancient pathways. You still with me? Jake gave a crooked smile. Wouldn't miss it. They moved carefully, Lynara leading the way, her Zevani senses attuned to the hidden dangers within the temple. The corridors grew narrower, more claustrophobic, and with each step, the air thickened with an oppressive force. Then they reached the chamber. It was vast, a cathedral of forgotten gods. Towering statues lined the walls, their carved eyes staring down, judging. And at the center of it all, on a pedestal carved from obsidian, was the artifact. A crystal, humming with an internal fire, pulsing as though alive. Lynara stepped forward, mesmerized. This was it. The key to ending the war that had consumed entire star systems. The one thing that could tip the balance. Jake exhaled sharply. Feels like a trap. She turned to him, nodding. It is. But we don't have a choice. Before either could move, the chamber trembled. The statues shuddered, their stone limbs grinding against centuries of stillness. Eyes that had long been lifeless flickered with energy. Jake instinctively pulled Lynara back. Yeah, definitely a trap. The first statue lunged, stone cracking as it came to life. Lynara barely had time to react before Jake was already pulling his weapon free. A deafening shot echoed through the chamber, striking the statue's chest. The impact barely slowed it down. Lynara cursed under her breath. We can't fight them. We need the artifact and an exit. Jake grunted, shifting to shield her as another statue moved. Then grab it. I'll keep them busy. She hesitated. You're barely standing. Lynara, he snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. Go. She ran. The moment her fingers closed around the artifact, the entire temple reacted. The energy surged, flooding the walls, the statues convulsing as if in pain. The chamber itself seemed to collapse inward. Jake was already moving toward her, but his legs faltered. He swayed, his wound sapping his strength. Lynara cursed, rushing back. She threw his arm over her shoulder, ignoring the heat of his fevered skin. Not leaving you, she growled. Together, they stumbled toward the exit as the temple roared around them, its ancient guardians giving chase. Lynara didn't know if they'd make it, but she knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. The ground beneath them buckled, forcing Lynara and Jake into a desperate sprint. The temple was collapsing, its ancient foundations shaking apart as though rejecting their very presence. Lynara clutched the artifact to her chest, its eerie warmth seeping into her skin. She had no time to decipher its mysteries, not while they were being hunted. Jake stumbled, his body weakened by the poison still coursing through his veins. Lynara gritted her teeth and tightened her grip on him, practically dragging the human forward. "Come on," she urged. Almost there. Behind them, the statues advanced, their massive stone bodies unhindered by the crumbling floor. Their glowing eyes pulsed with unnatural energy, illuminating the darkened corridors as they pursued without hesitation. Lynara's sharp eyes scanned ahead. The exit was close, the golden light of the jungle filtering through a break in the temple's structure. But between them and freedom lay a final challenge, a chasm, split by time and seismic forces, its depths lost in shadows. Jake exhaled sharply. "Figures." Lynara glanced at him. "You're not going to like what I'm about to say." Jake let out a breathless chuckle. "I already don't." "We jump." He stiffened. "Oh, great plan. My legs feel like lead, and you want me to fly?" Lynara didn't give him time to argue. She adjusted her grip, positioned herself just right, and with all the strength her Zevani body could muster, she launched them forward. For a split second, they were weightless, suspended between life and death. Then they hit the other side, barely. Lynara landed first, skidding against loose debris. Jake, however, landed hard, his injured side colliding with the rocky ledge. A pained grunt escaped him as he struggled to hold on. Lynara reached out, her claws gripping his wrist. "I've got you." Jake's fingers twitched against hers, his grip weakening. His fevered gaze met hers, a silent battle waging between pride and trust. For a terrifying moment, Lynara thought he'd let go, sacrificing himself to buy her time. "Don't," she snarled. "You're not dying today." With a feral growl, she pulled him up with every ounce of strength she had left. His weight nearly dragged her down with him, but she refused to yield. With one last heave, she threw him onto solid ground, collapsing beside him in exhaustion. The statues reached the chasm's edge. Their glowing eyes flickered, processing the gap, but they did not leap. Instead, they stood there, motionless, as though bound by an unseen force. Jake exhaled weakly. "That was awful." Lynara managed a shaky laugh. "Told you." But relief was short-lived. The jungle, once a beacon of safety, now felt equally treacherous. The artifact pulsed in her hands, as though sensing its own importance. And then, from the shadows, came another presence, one she hadn't accounted for. A figure emerged from the foliage, clad in battle-worn armor. Tall, imposing, and very much not friendly. Well, the stranger drawled, leveling a weapon at them. "Looks like you did the hard part for me." Lynara's heart pounded. The real fight was just beginning. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. With Jake at her side, she faced the unknown with renewed determination. They had survived impossible odds, fought through death itself. This was just another challenge, another obstacle. And like everything before, they would overcome it. The artifact, still warm in her grasp, pulsed with a quiet promise, a reminder that the greatest power wasn't in weapons or war, but in the choices they made, in the bonds they forged. True strength lies not in brute force, but in perseverance, trust, and the will to fight for what truly matters. Lynara's grip tightened around the artifact as she stared at the armed stranger. Jake, despite his weakened state, shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the threat. The air between them grew charged, heavy with unspoken intent. The stranger's helmet tilted slightly. "Hand it over. Now." Lynara's mind raced. If they gave up the artifact, everything they had fought for, the lives lost, the wounds endured, would mean nothing. But with Jake injured and her own energy spent, a direct fight wasn't an option. Jake, ever the reckless one, chuckled weakly. "You really think we went through hell just to gift wrap this thing for you?" The stranger's fingers twitched over the trigger. "I won't ask again." Lynara inhaled sharply, forcing her exhaustion aside. Her species weren't warriors, but they were brilliant strategists. And right now, she needed a strategy. She glanced at Jake, saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes, and made her move. In a blur, she tossed the artifact high into the air. The stranger's gaze instinctively followed it, exactly what she had counted on. Jake lunged forward with the last of his strength, tackling the stranger to the ground. Lynara didn't wait. She snatched the weapon from the stunned enemy's grip and leveled it at them. "Stay down," she warned, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. The stranger groaned, pinned beneath Jake's weight. "Damn humans," they muttered. Lynara caught the artifact just before it hit the ground, cradling it protectively. The energy pulsing within felt calmer now, as if it recognized that it had fallen into the right hands. Jake exhaled sharply. "You okay?" She nodded. "We need to leave before more of them show up." With difficulty, Jake got to his feet. Lynara kept the weapon trained on the stranger as they backed away, retreating into the dense jungle. The moment they were far enough, she tossed the weapon into the undergrowth, useless to her now, but a necessary distraction to buy them time. As they trudged forward, Jake limped but kept pace. "So, what's the plan?" Lynara gazed at the artifact, its glow reflecting in her eyes. "We deliver this to those who can end the war." Jake gave her a sideways glance. And after that? She considered it. Everything they had been through, the choices they had made, it had to mean something. "We go home." Jake smirked. "You saying you're tired of saving the galaxy?" Lynara let out a soft chuckle. "No. Just tired of nearly dying every time." They walked on, the jungle swallowing their footprints as the temple crumbled behind them, sealing its secrets away once more. Moral: strength isn't just found in battle, it's found in resilience, in wit, and in the bonds we forge. The strongest warriors aren't always the ones who fight, but the ones who endure, who adapt, and who protect what truly matters.